Hello, and welcome to Now You're Cooking with Gas. This video is about creating a widget that shows which direction damage came from. To start with this feature, we're going to copy the functions that we had added to the enemy character into the player character. OnDamageTaken changed and OnDamageTaken. We then hook these up. Compile and launch the editor. First, I will create a turret. This is a blueprint based on the GG Destructible. This is so that it has an ability system component and attribute set. In here, I'm just going to add a cube. Point two. Place this on top of one of these destructibles. And all it's going to do is fire a projectile at the player. I call set timer by event on a 2-second repeating loop. Add the custom event. Call this fire at player. Going to get the ability system component, and as previously, going to make an outgoing spec. And effect context. This will just be GE damage. With that, we're going to assign tag set by caller. The tag is our damage set by caller. I'm just going to set it to 1 damage. And spawn the projectile. This is going to fire from get actor location. Plus 100 in the z-axis. The destination will be the player. We'll call get player pawn to get its actor location. And then subtract that. From here. and rotation from X vector to turn it into a rotator. And the owner will be self. And the spec handle will be set as well. We run that, we can see it's just shooting a projectile at the player. Next, we create the widget. WBP damage direction. This widget will be a canvas with an image, which I'll rename to image damage direction. Make sure it's a variable. I'm going to add an animation, which I'll just call flash. Add the image damage direction. Add a track to the color and opacity. I just want the opacity, one of those. I'm just gonna do it for a second. Add a keyframe, and this will just be 0. This image needs to be centered, and I'll make it 600 by 600. I need to create a function. Just call this add damage direction. This will take a source location vector. And I'm going to add a variable for the third-person character. Let's call it BPTPC. I'm going to expose this on spawn. And then in the third-person blueprint, I'm going to add the damage taken event that we just set up. And then first, I'll add the new widget. Create a widget. Promote that to a variable. Make sure that we're setting self as this new value. Using that variable instead of the owner is basically just saving a little bit of time. And we add this to the viewport. Here we just need to grab the widget, call add damage direction, and we're sending along the damage causer's location. If you were not using gas for this, and you're using the built-in damage, you could just use any damage It has the same damage causer. But if you're not using gas, then why are you watching this video? In here, we're going to use the third-person characters variable to get the follow camera. Then get world rotation and get forward vector. All that just to get the vector of the direction that the camera is facing. From the source location, we're going to subtract the actor location. We're going to create another function. Let's call it calc and calculate angle. This will have two vector inputs. Let's call it v1 and v2. And then that will return a float angle. We're going to use that angle on the image to call set render transform angle. That will rotate the damage direction image that we have in the center of the screen based on the angle that we returned from calc angle. And then we will play the flash animation to fade it out over a second. In calc angle, we'll basically be doing the math that is in the link that I'll have in the description. So first, I'm going to take v1 and v2 and save them again as local variables. I'll call it flat v1 and flat v2. I'm going to remove these so that I can split this out along with the incoming variables, because I do not want the z value. Now that we have the two vectors without their elevation, we can call dot product. Dot product will give us a value, which we can send to arccos or acos. We want the degree version. The result of this will be the smallest angle between these two vectors. Since it's the smallest angle, then it's not going to have a sign. For that, then we can also call cross product. The cross product function is just a little bit of math, which basically takes the two vectors and is giving you a perpendicular vector, which is rotated from v1 to v2, I believe. So what that means is, for example, if v1 was pointing straight out x and v2 was pointing straight out y, cross product would be pointing upwards, unless I had that exactly opposite, in which case it would be pointing down. But either way, since we flatten these vectors by removing the z component, it's either going to point straight up or point down. So then we can compare that value to 0. In which case, it will either return the angle or the opposite direction of the angle. Make this a little neater so I can show it. And I forgot to normalize the incoming vectors. So I'm going to do that. We can do the same thing. Split that, drag these in. Alt-click those to get rid of it. Recombine. So they'll go in there instead. Similarly. All right, so you can see that it's facing the wrong way, or the opposite way, I guess. That's because the angle was made negative, or not made negative at the flip-flopped. So all that is down here, I had this backwards. So actually I can just change this instead. If it's greater than 0, and there you go. The last thing we can do when it started, the image was visible. So we can go in here. We do not want to set this to 0 because the value it's actually setting is this value here. If we'd set that one to 0, then it would just always be invisible. Oh, did I? No, it's at the right time. Okay. But why did it reset? All right, there we go. So one last thing we can do is that when you get hit, it's just staying in that location, even though the character's moving at that point. So we can go in here and effectively copy this functionality. Set this as a variable. And then do this on tick. So I'm going to get the image. Going to get the render, actually the color and opacity. Split that. As long as this is greater than 0. Hold B and click for a branch. And it's backwards again. And that's because I did not drag this in here. There we go. Now it turns. So you know exactly where the damage came from and you can just snap to it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more, you know what to do. If you have suggestions on future content or abilities you would like to see, let me know down below.